r/AskReddit, what's your I told you so moment? Since I was 14, my throat got itchy when I ate apples. I told my mom, but she thought I just didn't want to eat apples and forced me to eat them. Went to the doctor's office and got a test for allergies. Turns out, I'm allergic to apples, peaches, and many other fruits. Anytime I'm asked to give an expected time to deliver on a project, give an honest assessment, and then told that estimate seems too large and the bosses give a much shorter time frame, my original estimation is nearly always the more accurate of the two. Why ask questions you don't want to know the answer to anyway? My newborn baby was projectile vomiting after every feeding. I took her to the doctor several times, always ended up being sent away with suggestions to try a different formula. I tried like 4 different ones, no change. The 4th or 5th visit, they sent me away again with the same recommendation, even though I pleaded with them to figure out what was wrong with my baby. I left the office and drove to the ER instead. She ended up having emergency surgery that day. The surgeon said she would have starved to death, or maybe dehydrated, had she gone much longer without the surgery. I gave the doctors in that office a piece of my mind. Lawyer here, fired a partner who I found some real irregularities in their spending habits vs. what they were making after he couldn't provide a good answer to where it came from. Other partner left and started a new firm with them because they disagreed with my decision and refused to look at the evidence. Turns out he stole $500K of a client's money, got disbarred, and is now facing prison time. I told her to look at the evidence and she didn't listen. My sister and I were out sledding when we were kids at this place with a really steep hill. I had unknowingly gone down a sled path that had a jump in it, and when I landed it really hurt my back. So when I got back up to the top of the hill I told my sister, don't go that way, the jump really hurts. She called me a baby and didn't believe me that it really hurt, so she decided she would go down that path on her sled. Well, she hit the jump and didn't get back up. Turns out she fell so hard she had broken her leg. When we finally got her back up the hill and to the car, I got to tell her I told you so. I work at a US Navy shipyard. My worst I told you so moment was when a submarine had multiple issues with sanitation/collection tanks and the piping that led from the showers and toilets to the sanitation/collection tanks, documented and pointed out the same problems over a 12-week period. Supervisors and the tank area manager didn't give a damn and pointedly ignored my reports. Undocking day was approaching and the captain of the sub wanted the boat out on time, so they moved up the tank closure schedule. So tank closing protocol requires several sign-offs, one from a qualified civilian inspector, one from a qualified Navy hull technician sailor, and one from a qualified Navy engineering officer. That tank in question failed all 3 concurrent inspections. Undocking got pushed back by 30 days until all problems found were corrected. Daily operations estimated costs were north of $10,000/day. Factor in the mandatory overtime and rework required and we were looking at maybe triple the daily cost. This is just people's pay. I didn't get to see the material cost overrun, but I know for a fact that a lot of the materials got shipped in or fabricated in-house overnight. Needless to say, a lot of people on general schedule pay got chewed out by the then shipyard co in private. My best friend started dating my ex-wife 10 years after the divorce, and he checked if I'd take issue even though he didn't need to. Anyway, when we divorced it was because she was cheating on me while I was in Afghanistan. He goes out of state for work and told me she started acting off, not answering calls, quick to hang up, starting fights when he's home or going to parties rather than spend time with him. I pointed out this is what she did to me almost exactly and stated that if he confronts her on her shit she will probably without provocation accuse him of cheating, and more to the point most likely because she is actively cheating. 30-minute monologue of how she's grown up and she's not that person now, she's just used to not having to answer to others or having a real relationship in year. 3 hours later he calls because he went to pick up some weed and there she is blowing the cellar. Was picking beans with my sister and mom. To this day I still don't know why the fence was electric, but it was. I touched it and I got zapped. It wasn't too bad but it hurt. I jumped away and my sister saw me. I said that it was an electric fence. Of course she just thought I was pranking her. I was trying to tell her the whole time we picked beans, but she didn't believe me. Right at the end she touched the fence and she didn't see it coming at all. Her face was just like, oh loved the car ride home. I told you, idiot. Had a weirdly dark freckle, the color of chocolate. I showed spouse and he called me a hypochondriac, and if I go to a doctor, I'd be wasting their time. I went to the dermatologist. It was melanoma. I spent months telling my mother to get a dash camera. I even sent her a link to a cheap one on Amazon so she would at bare minimum have something. Sometime later she got a new car, and in less than a week she got into an accident. She was fine. But because she couldn't prove that the other driver was at fault, their insurance company would only pay for some of the damage. Car was totaled. The worst part is that she still hasn't gotten a damn camera. In high school I was at a party where everyone was getting drunk. I had come with 2 friends, and near the end of the night this one guy there was losing everyone into his van to get late night food. He swore he was not drunk, and there were so many people in his car, including the 2 people I came with. It was not a battle I was going to win, but it seemed like an obviously dumb situation. Bunch of underage kids packed into a van driving around in the suburbs at 1:00 in the morning. I told my friends that this wasn't a good idea and they need to get out of the van and come back gone with me. My house was within walking distance. They acted like I was a party pooper for a sec, but then they got out. Next day I find out the guy driving ran a red light and got T-boned by a truck. The one kid in the back almost died and everyone got banged up. The friends I pulled out of the van were in the back seat along with him. Not saying I saved their lives, but I really may have saved their lives. My partner and I were broke and struggling to make ends meet, but we always kept money in the budget for fun or takeout nights. One night we decided to get fish and chips. My partner had never ordered from that particular place before, but it was my favorite, so he knew it'd be good. We don't have a lot of money to spare, so I know we had to order smart. We'll only order what we need. We start driving and I'm about to call, and my partner tells me he wants to order $10 worth of chips. For those of you who don't know how much that is, a scoop of chips is usually about $2.3. I tried to tell him that it was a ridiculous order, and that this particular fish and chip shop was very generous with their portions, which is why it was one of my favorites. He was adamant about $10 chips, and that he was so hungry that it's not like any would be wasted. We had a mini argument in the car, and I finally gave up and said, "Fine, order your chips, but you had better eat them all." We get to the fish and chip shop and we go to the counter to pay, and the old fellow who runs the shop comes over to serve us. We tell him what order we're here to collect. "That order is yours," he goes. I start to shake my head and smile. "Yes," my partner replies. "And it's just for you too?" the old man asks, looking concerned. "Ah, yes." At this point I start laughing. I tried to tell him. We both laugh and my partner realizes his mistake when the old guy pulls out 2 huge parcels of chips. One of those alone would have fed a full family. We all laughed our little hearts out, thanked the man, and went home to eat our fish and chips. And no, he didn't eat them all. We didn't even get through the first parcel. Now whenever we need the other person to trust our judgment on something, we say, $10 chips, and the other person will always relent. It still cracks me up every time I think about his face when the old man gave us our order. I once owned a dog who was very stubborn and independent. She lived a feral life in the mountains as a young pup, and I feel like that played a role. She felt more like a roommate than a pet. She was having heart trouble when she got older, so she had to get a chest scan at the vet. These 2 men came out to get her, so I gave them a heads up that she would absolutely dislike being flipped on her back and held there for the scan. Flipping a dog on its back is putting it in a pretty submissive position. One of the guys interrupted me and basically said they were professionals and I had to just let them work. They snapped a muzzle on her and took her to the back. A few seconds pass, then I hear a crash and a few yells. One of the guys who took her comes out and sheepishly asks for my help. It turns out as soon as they flipped her on her back, she kicked out of their arms, unclipped her muzzle, removed it with her front paws, then made a mad dash for freedom. I caught her roaming around the back of the vet's office and she was perfectly well behaved while I held her for the scan. I felt bad for 2 guys she escaped from, but I had tried to warn them. Someone started talking about a bottle of Newman's Own salad dressing while at dinner with my family, and I said something like, "I'm pretty sure that was started by the actor/race car driver Paul Newman," to which one of my siblings replied, "No, it was someone else." I grabbed the bottle and turned it around and started reading the label out loud. The first sentence was Paul Newman's career was acting, but his passion was auto racing. I stopped reading after that. I've talked about this cheating scandal at my high school before. Something I never mentioned was my friend was about to ask for the answers to a test that he really needed, told him not to do it, wasn't worth, and all. Thankfully, he didn't do it. When the whole scandal came out, 3 kids got expelled, 8 suspended. I know a dozen more were caught, but I don't know what happened to them. My friend's teacher ended up giving him and a few other kids an A just for being honest. Apparently, he was one of the few kids in that class that didn't cheat. This dumb asshole woman wouldn't leave the llamas at our petting zoo alone, even after I warned her. Eventually they had enough and spit all over her, green goopy spit from head to torso. She threw up a bunch and I laughed, until I smelled it, and then I was retching too. This is more of a I told myself so, but anyway, when I applied to medical school, one of the application essays had a prompt that asked us what we would do if we did not get into medical school. I thought I would take a risk since it was a reach school and I wanted to stand out. I kept thinking it wasn't worth it and that I should just write a normal essay, but for some reason just went with the riskier option. I wrote that I would go to law school and become a lawyer specializing in prosecuting medical malpractice. I ended up getting an interview and had a good laugh about it with one of the interviewers. Did not get into that medical school. I was a fresh-faced sysadmin, a PFY if you will, who had just been handed my first big project. I took it over after it was already in progress due to the lead admin having a medical emergency. It was a critical environment and the key component was a 2-node database cluster. I was in way over my head, but I had support from a few project members and so I was making my way through it. At one point I was reviewing the connectivity to the servers. The idea for a critical piece of infrastructure is to reduce single points of failure, SPOF. As I was going through the documentation I noticed both database servers had all of their network connections run to the same switch, so I brought it up to the network guy on the team, a senior engineer. He said not to worry about it and brushed me off, so I brought it up on the next project call. I said if we're trying to keep this thing up and running according to the SLA, we really need to eliminate this issue and put half the connections for both systems to another switch. Senior network guy said I was wrong. Switches are very reliable and rarely fail. Like I said, this was my first project so I relented. The systems went live, into production use, the next week, literally within 5 days of the systems being live and customer facing. The fucking switch dies. Both nodes of the cluster go offline. The database is down. The app is down. Huge cost to the business unit customer. The outage review call was pretty fun. As the admin I was asked why the systems were connected to the same switch. I said I had called that out as a risk and the network guy said it was no problem and I was overruled. It was awesome when the call leader asked the network guy if he still felt that way. Laughing. Helping a former friend do some renovations in a house he had just purchased. I had better than half a clue what I was doing, and my other friend who was with us definitely knew what she was doing, but the guy who owned the house hardly knew which end of the hammer to grip. We get down to the foundation walls and there is an almost brand new 4x4 post running from floor to ceiling that he thought was ugly. I tried to explain to him that it was clearly load bearing, and my friend chimed in that it was obviously there for a reason. But his reply was something to the effect of girls being hysterical and mocking us for thinking the ceiling was going to fall down. I literally backed away from the situation and when he took a maul to the beam and knocked it loose I watched the ceiling drop. He still thought I was overreacting until we got upstairs and saw the 3 gap between the floor and baseboards along the front wall of the house. Laughing. Bed frame wasn't properly lashed down while moving. Partner insisted the weight of the frame would keep it in place. Flew into the middle of a major intersection on a left turn. We dodged 4 lanes of oncoming traffic to collect the pieces. I fixed my partner with a look that could peel paint, and he said I know, you told me so and you're right, I'm sorry. I still give him shit for it every time we move something. It's funny now, but goddamn was I pissed at the time. I told my mom, who is a nurse, that I am sick and she said I was lying. After 2 months and a lot of blood coughed up she took me to the doctor. I had pneumonia and a double ear infection. I also had a bunch other issues that I can't really remember. I had to take 7 medications and have to use a nebulizer daily. That was the biggest I told you so moment I ever had. Went to the doctor on and off for breathing problems to no avail. A lot of rub some dirt on it mentality. Wound up in the ER as a result of an asthma attack. Kept the bracelet on and everything when I went back the next week to see him, not as satisfying as I would have hoped. My dad had a bad habit of driving down the middle lane for a whole mile while he commuted back from his weekly shopping trip. I always warned him that he can't be in that lane for that long, but he always wrote it off, saying it's fine. Finally, after doing this for 2 years, he was pulled over by the police and ticketed. He was upset that day, but all I could say is I told you so. Just left a job where I handled their order fulfillment and customer support. Due to lack of sales, I was pushed to part-time working from home and focusing on customer support. My position was handed off to a salaried employee who had no clue how to operate shipping and wouldn't dare to ask me how to utilize our discounted shipping. Instead, he shipped at regular pricing, costing the already broke company nearly $10,000 over a span of 6 weeks. I warned them a few days in about the issue, but they wouldn't believe me and allowed them to continue going down that road. My brother had a really bad habit of putting his wallet in the back pocket of his pants and going to work and busy places all around the city. You could practically see it sticking out of the pocket. I warned him many times over the years that he's inviting himself to be robbed, that a skilled thief is gonna swipe it off easy without him having any clue. He ignored me, saying he was too mindful to let that happen. One day he came home looking ghastly as hell. Turns out he indeed got robbed, lost all his debit cards, government-issued ID cards and a ton of other important stuff besides money. I literally said, "I told you so." Mother driving with electric weight loss thing, that can shock her if turned up too high. Told her to take it off because if it shocks her she will swerve. Mother doesn't take it off. Moments later, she gets shocked, and swerves. She didn't drive with that thing on again. So I was throwing knives at a tree, and my father told me to be careful cause the knife could bounce off of the tree. I didn't see that to actually happen, so I continued throwing knives at the tree, and then it happened. A knife bounced off of the tree and hit me in the foot. When he went to go examine how bad the wound was, he asked me how it happened. I told him the knife bounced off and hit me in the foot, and then he said, "I told you so." Church I went to as a teenager and, along with my friends, telling the leaders there that something wasn't right about the youth pastor and his behavior was off. Nothing was done. We eventually all left. 2 years later he punched a kid on a retreat, while it turns out he was fucking the pastor's wife the whole time. Fucking told you. At work we keep buckets of pizza sauce with lids on them prepped and ready to go for, well, making pizzas. We usually keep them under the make line table so they're easily accessible when you need to switch them out between the empty ones and the full ones. One day I watched as my co-worker grabs a bucket of sauce with one hand and lifts it up to the counter and sets it down. I told him, "You got lucky this time, but never use one hand to lift the bucket up. Always use 2 hands. Those lids aren't always on tightly." Does he listen to me? Narrator: No, he does not. Not even a week later he does the same thing again, only for an entire bucket of sauce to spill all over the floor and countertop as he looks at it with a legit surprised Pikachu face. I just looked at it and told him to get a mop. For Easter my wife was going to bring scalloped potatoes to the family dinner. My grandmother said she was going to bring potato salad, so my wife decided that was too much potato and she was going to bring something else. I told my wife no way. She should still make scalloped potatoes. She had her mind made up though. Arrived for Easter dinner without the scalloped potatoes. Everyone was asking where the scalloped potatoes were. My wife said, "Why didn't you tell me I should have made potatoes?" I did. I did. Told my walking boss that some of the parts had rust, so don't ship that pallet. He said it's not rust and sent them anyways. Entire pallet got sent right back to us and we had to go through and check every single part. They're tiny parts and had probably over 5,000 of them in a pallet. I joined my HOA board, with one main focus of getting our ponds fixed so our road doesn't flood every time it rains. Other members refused to meet for a few months, Oct through Jan, saying that there was time, they're all busy, it's not a big deal, etc. One even told me to relax. Honey, this is the South. I'm originally from New York. But that's irrelevant to the fact that our current neighborhood floods all the time. We finally meet in February, and over the next few weeks it dawns on the 3 of them just how much paperwork and bureaucracy is involved, including dealing with the state and town regulations and inspections. Now, we are facing another hurricane season with poorly draining and badly eroded ponds. Just like I said we would. Well, one of these board members lives right next to a pond. The same woman who was so relaxed in November, her land is now so eroded and undercut that chunks are starting to visibly fall off into the pond itself. We finally managed to settle on a solution, but now the calendars for the pond maintenance companies are booked out through July, like I said they would be. So, my moment was, this bitch, who was so relaxed and southern in the winter, has the cojones to email all of us and say that the delay in us arriving at a solution makes us all look bad, and some shit about teamwork and being more organized. I copy and pasted the email thread, when I said that we would be facing hurricane season with flooding and erosion issues, and she told me to relax, it is the South, I literally fucking told you so, now go move your garden, because it's going into the pond. Boring, especially for the young UNS on here, but very fucking satisfying. I told my ex that his cat had diabetes after he peed on the floor and it was sticky. He didn't believe me. 3 months later, we went to the vet and after running a few tests to find out why the cat was so lethargic, you never would have guessed what the cat had. This was Thursday, March 12, 2020. I came home from school and my parents effectively told me that they didn't want me to go the following day because if I did, the risk of my having coronavirus would multiply by like 5-ish. Anyways, I did some research and it looked like my high school would have to shut down either the following day, or the next Monday, which I conveyed to my friends. I didn't get to say goodbye to them in person, which kinda sucked, and a group of 5 who were from a club I was in told me that I was being overdramatic, that I was brainwashed by the news, that I was totally overreacting when I conveyed this all to them. The next day I spent at home and at noon straight up I get texts from them along the lines of how you called it and you were right. I think I legitimately texted them told you so. They never apologized for all of the shitty things they said the night before and I cut contact with them. Fortunately though, my good friends are all smart and safe and I've been able to see a few of them, which has been nice. When I was about 15, I got my dirt bike out in the spring to get it tuned up and running after being stored all winter. The rule was that I had to have my MX boots on and a helmet at all times if I were to ride. As I'm walking out of the house to start the bike with tennis shoes on, my mother tells me I'm not getting on that bike without gear. I assure her I'm just trying to start it. She grew up around motorcycles and told me those boots protect you even when trying to start the bike. I give her this yeah, I'll be fine response and she tells me not to come crying to her if I bust my shin. 15 minutes later, I'm frustrated that I can't kick start the bike and start rolling it down the driveway to roll start it. I pop it in gear. The rear tire locks up, and I slam my shin into the metal foot peg, so good that I chipped bone and have a gnarly scar over 15 years later. I tried to hide it, but it was impossible walking back into the house with shorts on and blood gushing everywhere. It was such a bad wound, there was no stitching it. Guess who always wore their boots from then on? 2009 and I'm sicker than I've ever been. I can barely stand up and breathing hurts, but my dad brushes it off as me being overdramatic. Well, 2 weeks later and I'm starting to feel okay again, but my dad has obviously caught what I had and with his asthma it's not great. We get him into a hospital and they sweep him up into isolation so quick because he has H1N1. I made a stupid joke about him being the overdramatic one and the nurse thought I was just horrible for it. LOL. I was hired to do some sort of transformation for our software release. Was cranking away, making good progress. We opened a foreign office where they needed a project to justify their existence, so they created a parallel process similar to mine. Since they had 8 resources vs. R2 to work on it, and we had no buy-in, we kind of had to let them have it. They were going for a different approach that, while taking a lot of resources, was not that transformative and wouldn't affect the bottom line. As we were wrapping our part of the project, I told the business unit leader that and detailed what would and wouldn't change. A year later, the bottom line has not changed and what I said would happen, happened. Weirdly enough, I got a lot of brownie points because I was the only one to see the flaws, gotten some massive raises too. Now I'm viewed as some sort of expert who was wrongfully shunned, and I'm cashing in on it. My sil dated this dude that outwardly was okay. My niece, who was an adult at the time, absolutely despised this guy. He wound up murdering my sil and killing himself. Terrible loss. Thanks for watching. Comment suggestions for any future videos and make sure to subscribe to not miss out on any more good content. I upload daily videos from r/AskReddit, and if you liked the video, make sure to like the video.